what separates them both in faith or actual performance on the battlefield or their legacy?
Sure. Well, so the Hospitallers are older but kind of newer, so it's hard to explain. But they existed as an order first, and what they were was they were just it was a hospice for pilgrims traveling from Europe to the Holy Land. And they needed, obviously, someone there, a Christian, to provide them with some relief, a place to live, a place to sleep, and oftentimes medical aid. So it was a hospice formed around the Holy Sepulchre, the Church of the Holy, where we're, of course, the primary destination for pilgrims, but they were not militant at all. So it's right around maybe 260s or 270 is when this hospital by an Amalfi Italian merchant group actually they laid the foundations of it back then.
And this was in 260
So the first
AD.
military group is really the Templars. And right after the First Crusade, after Jerusalem, the Holy Land has been secured, it's obviously still a small island of Christianity in a sea of hostile Islam. And so what would happen is, even though lots of Europeans started going there on pilgrimages, but they would still be attacked and savaged and mauled in really horrific ways. Okay, I mean, just very shocking, atrocious, rated R ways, let's just say. And so eventually something needed to be done, and a small group of knights decided they were going to commit their lives to to becoming monks, essentially, on the one hand, and on the other hand, protecting pilgrims. And they became the Knights of the Templars because they were giving Baldwin, I think the II, gave them the temple, Al-Aqsa Mosque, but they understood it as Solomon's Temple, and that became their residence. And they were founded around 1119, but they became formally recognized at a major council 10 years later in 1129. And at that point, they really started growing. Now, the Hospitallers were still at this time functioning as a hospice and providing medical aid and relief for pilgrims, but they slowly followed suit and became militarized. And they've fully become militarized right around maybe 1170 or mid 1170s. But it's interesting to see the logic of both groups, because they both start off very pious and they become immensely militant, as I was saying, which seems like a strange contradiction. But if you look especially at the case of the Hospitallers, these are people whose entire vows were based on serving our lords the sick. That was actually part of one of their prayers, which is to give their beds to the poor and needy, and etc. And before long, they realized, the best way to serve these pilgrims was, instead of just sitting back and waiting until they get savaged and mauled, as they inevitably did by surrounding Muslims, we will preemptively put a stop to it by actually protecting them and even going on the offensive. And so that's why before long, both groups, in as much as they still maintained their primary duties of protecting pilgrims and serving them via hospices, became in the end more just seen as the ultimate crack troops of Christendom versus Islam.
In Jerusalem, is this the last generation of the Christian domain in Jerusalem before Saladin takes it? What happened after did they go to the lesser fortresses in the Holy Land?
Oh, you're talking about after when Saladin takes Jerusalem?
Yes.
Yeah, so what I was describing is before that, and they still have Jerusalem and all these other Christian kingdoms. After Jerusalem is taken in 1187 by Saladin, they actually become, even as time goes by and Muslims become stronger, post-Saladin, less and less aid comes from Europe, and more secular native Christians, the Franks that had been there for generations, sell or donate their properties and go back to Europe. And so what happens is they really start taking charge. That's why I say they're really the backbone of the Crusades, the Templars and the Hospitallers, especially as the years go by. So after Jerusalem is conquered, most of them, they had a series of castles all over the place and fortifications, which were very important. And in fact, it's well known, and I document this, but without them, they don't get this kind of credit, but without them, the Holy Land would have been lost much, much earlier. So they really, they were the primary reserve group that just kind of kept Saladin. There's all these anecdotes where he was so frustrated with them. This is why, by the way, after the Battle of Hattin in 1187, even though Saladin, the great magnanimous Saladin, is known to ransom, Christians and whatnot, when it came to them, both groups, he said, no, there's no ransom for them. It was either convert to Islam and renounce Christianity or die. And he had something like 300 of them ritually beheaded at the field
Why did they have such a, in popular imagination, Ridley Scott, remember Ridley Scott's, I'm just doing it by memory, but Kingdom of Heaven, where they're almost portrayed as buffoonish, aren't they?
That's just par for the course, Victor.
Yeah,
Any movie I watch about the Crusades, it's like the more really involved in the crusade and serious and taking the religion, the more buffoonish they appear and comical. And that, and the best one you're mentioning is, you're talking about the Kingdom of Heaven is Raymond, who's this crazy, he's a loose cannon and he's such a hypocrite and he just uses.
Yeah, I think he played in the actor played in Braveheart.
That guy. I don't know his name, but he's like Scottish or Irish.
Yeah.
And kind of rotund, larger fellow. Anyway, I like him. He's a good actor. But if you actually look at the sources, and I talk about it in the book, he actually, the real Reynold, Saladin, when he killed him, because he does kill him, actually offered him Islam or renounce Christ. And Reynold gives this really, heroic speech and basically says, I won't do what you want. And that's when he cuts his head off. That's a little more heroic than the sort of buffoonery that Hollywood.
Ice water or something. He drank ice water. And the other in the Kingdom of Heaven, was it Jeffrey? That I'm trying to remember in the film, the other evil person who was married to the
I
queen.
think it's King Guy.
Yeah, and he ended up in Cyprus, I think.
Yeah, he did.
He did, didn't he? He survived.
Yeah.
So, they after the Fourth Crusade, they're attrited and they start to disperse into the Eastern Mediterranean.
After the Fourth Crusade, you have the Fifth Crusade, which was almost successful. It's one of the least known, and it's the one that targeted Egypt.
Yes.
They conquered Dalmatia. And then they went to Mansoura by Cairo. But there's all kinds of reasons. I have several chapters on the Fifth Crusade. And again, the Templars and the Hospitallers really shine out, especially. Again, and I quote a lot of primary sources to show you how they were seen. Are the primary sources in Arabic, Latin, Greek, and Old French, or what are they in English? Yeah, exactly. It's Latin, Old French, Arabic, a little bit of Greek, but most of them I would say in Latin and Old French. William of Tyre's Chronicles, of course, indispensable. The Rothlin Chronicle, the Templar of Tyre, or is that his name? I think the Templar of Tyre, who wasn't a Templar. And these are all eyewitness chronicle sources. The Itinerarium Peregrinorum by an anonymous chronicler who, that's the primary Third Crusade chronicle. So we're lucky to have a plentiful supply of primary sources. And again, a lot of them are from the Muslim Arabic side, which and as usual, I like to use both so everyone knows how both. In fact, I conclude the book by quoting from Arabic sources because in many ways, they're the ones who most underscore how they feared the Templars and the Hospitallers. And in a way, it's almost like a begrudging kind of nod of respect that they give to them. They always regularly portray them as their chief thorn, the ultimate problem. They talk about other monks and clergy as being hypocrites. You can buy them off, but not the Templars and the Hospitallers. And these are internal dialogues between Muslim strategists.